Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and our special guest right now, as promised, is the wonderful Kathy Visconde. She's here to talk with us about the CARD workshop model. And Kathy, you've worked at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders for a while.
A while,
How long?
since 1994.
Wow, that is a while. You don't look old enough to have worked any place for more than 3 years. So
it helps.
you must be doing something right.
Yeah,
And
I was actually recruited from UCLA.
Really? So very young. And but you still could pass for somebody at UCLA. So the kids are keeping you young, I guess.
Thank you.
I need for that to spread my way.
Oh, definitely.
But in any case, I asked you to talk about the CARD workshop model because I think people have gotten used to thinking of ABA in one specific way, and we don't have to anymore. But people tend to think of it as, oh, you got to have the provider that you live close enough to, and they come to your house and they bring the therapist, and that's one way to do it. And that's a great way to do it. I don't think anybody is trying to say, you know, don't do it that way, but it's not available to a lot of people.
Definitely.
So when did you guys start doing the workshop model?
Workshops have been in existence since I started at CARD. So they were already providing those types of services. And in all honesty, I think a lot of our sites that weren't in California came about from workshops.
Okay.
And so we had a number of families in the Virginia area or Washington, D.C., and Mary Ann Castle, who is the managing supervisor out there, actually started as a therapist or working with Doreen Grandpichet at a workshop model type of format. And similarly with our New York offices, that was very similar. It's a situation in the sense that we had a supervisor traveling out to New York to provide services, and I think eventually he either went back home because he lived in the area or he decided to relocate. So really, I think workshops are pretty much the starting point for a lot of our sites.
Okay. And we do workshops through the Center for Autism and Related Disorders virtually all around the world, right?
Yes. I think over the years, we've definitely covered different parts of the world. We have families right now in Italy, as well as South Africa, different parts of the Bahamas. We've also covered, we also have families in Bangkok, but even prior to that, we've served families in India, different parts of Europe, different parts of South Africa, or South America. So, and Canada, if you want to even talk about that part of the world.
Right. And you even do the workshop model in some of the places in the United States where they're just too far removed from.
Correct.
So it doesn't have to be in a far-flung place.
Definitely. We have families in Washington State, Tennessee, Missouri, West Virginia, different parts of Texas, even just parts where we're not able to reach through our local sites.
Yeah, okay. So now that we've talked about that it's everywhere, and this has the potential to be everywhere, what is it?
Well, workshop service is a supervision-based service, and so we definitely have the potential to provide services that families locally could serve or could have. The only difference is that the therapists are coming from the parents directly. And so we could provide a supervisor, we provide all of the training, we can do as much oversight as the families want, but the therapist will be privately hired.
Okay.
And they're under the supervision or the guidance of the families or under their employment, I should say.
And our topic for today is ABA for beginners. So even for somebody who is just hearing about ABA for the first time, who doesn't even know what supervision is, and let's take just a second to talk about how much ABA you want to do and how a typical program might run.
Sure. Well, I think a lot of families are still coming to us looking at wanting a full program. And I think to make it very simple, a full program would be roughly 30 to 40 hours per week, anywhere from 6 to 12 hours of supervision per month. You have anywhere from 3 to 5 therapists working with the child, of course of the week, for 2 to 3 hours at a time.
Okay, and again, in the workshop model, the family hires them.
Correct. So we would ask the parents to hire staff And then upon hire, we would come in and provide an initial workshop. So anywhere from, we typically request about 2.5 days to 3 full days. And it'll allow us the opportunity to train the staff as well as the families, and then also put into place a program that's based off CARD.
Okay. And when we talk about 6 to 7 hours of supervision, what does that mean?
Supervision really is any work that involves the oversight of the program. So it could be clinic meetings, team meetings, either by Skype or some other means of video conferencing or by phone. It could be email correspondence with the parent. It could be video, reviewing video of therapy or of treatment. And it's really an opportunity for us to oversee the program and troubleshoot with the therapist, troubleshoot with the parents as well. And really making sure that the quality of the program stays true.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you brought up the quality of the program, because that's really, I think, what the heart of the supervision is, because we're all frustrated as parents that so much of the world looks at our kids and goes, autism all in one.
Yeah.
You know, here's the cookie cutter, here's what the school offers to every single child who has autism, and you go, well, this doesn't fit my child.
Yeah.
And supervision is the thing that really specifies that your child is going to get exactly what your child needs and is going to respond to, right?
And I think the biggest question parents tend to ask me is, how is the quality going to be different if I'm not near a CARD site? And I always say, you have the ability, we have the ability to provide you the exact same quality. That's really what it is, because you have the connection with the supervisor to whatever extent you need. We have therapists, and we have the ability to maintain consistency with them. We can continue to oversee them. We can continue to provide training. We can meet with them live. We can also take video footage of therapists and provide critiques on that as well. And so the only real difference is that if you have an IEP meeting tomorrow, I can't drive over to your house tomorrow. Or if you'd like me to go to do a school observation today, I can't do that. Or later in this week. It's just those types of logistics. Exactly. I as a supervisor can definitely attend an IEP for a workshop family. It just requires planning.
Okay. A really important thing because so much of the world has changed because of technology and for the better, and there are all kinds of things that we can do long distance that we couldn't do once upon a time. And there is the ability to Skype in and discuss things. But sometimes there is a level of planning that is required in order to get there are times when a person physically has to be there and you just have to plan for it.
Correct.
And your supervisors do actually physically go out on a regular basis.
Yes. So usually I think the cycle is a visit every 3 to 4 months. And so the initial workshop again will be roughly 3 days. And then for the next month or two, we'll do Skype or phone or other means of communication for roughly, again, 6 hours, let's say, on average. And then every 3 to 4 months, we'll come back, and typically a full day, day and a half, or 2 days. It really just depends on the needs of the family. And again, we'll look to see how the child is doing with the program. We'll also work with staff if we need to. We'll do an observation in the classroom setting. We'll meet with school staff. We'll do an IEP or a parent training. Really, it's just a matter of what do we want to accomplish, and let's plan accordingly.
Okay. When people ask me about, because I always like to put it right in parent terms that are really friendly, when people ask me about the workshop program, I generally say, have you ever watched The Super Nanny? You know how the nanny comes to the door, she comes in, and the first day, she comes for 2 days. The first day she watches everything that's going on, wants the family to react like they normally do. Then she goes away and puts together all of her materials. She comes back the second day and says, okay, here's the plan. And she trains the parents, this is how we're going to do it. Then she takes some time to train the kids. She works with the kids so the parents are watching how, and she says, so you got to uphold this. And she very quickly, it happens very quickly. She says, here's the plan. She leaves, but then she watches videotape of how they do it and comes back and says, here's what you did right, here's what you need to work on. And it's a very condensed version, but this is what it reminds me of. Am I pretty accurate?
It's very similar. I mean, there's definitely, all of our supervisors have to be very familiar with working with children on an ongoing basis. So it's not a matter of, I'm going to give you instruction and you're just going to do what I tell you to do. We're very hands-on, and we have to be able to demonstrate everything we want our therapists and our parents to do so that they have an understanding of what it looks like.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to give instruction, it's another thing to actually sit down and show you what I mean.
Yeah.
And so all of our supervisors go into a workshop knowing that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
And again, I think the intention always is no one leaves until we feel comfortable walking away.
There you go.
That's always what it is.
There you go.
And I always tell families after initial workshop, because they tend to ask, well, you know, what will we do when the supervisor leaves?
Yeah.
And I always tell families, you will be prepared to such an extent that the next day you will wake up in the morning and start.
Yeah.
And that's really all there is to it.
Yeah.
Your supervisor will not leave or shouldn't leave, or you won't want them to leave until you feel comfortable.
There you go. Okay, really wonderful explanation. Let's take a short break, and then we're going to come back and talk about, for a parent who's interested, what the expectations are and how they do that and all of those things. So stick with us. Back in just a few minutes. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and our special guest right now is the fabulous Kathy Visconti.
Thank you.
And you are fabulous, and you help so many families around the world. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And we've been talking about the CARD workshop model and what exactly that is. And so now I want to talk about it from a parent's perspective, that you're a parent and your child's been diagnosed with autism. You've heard about ABA. You've heard that it is the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism, and you've done a little research in your area of the world, and you discover that there is no ABA provider within an hour's drive, let's say. So you've heard that there's a CARD workshop model, and you have a beginning understanding of it. What do you do? What do you do next to begin the process of starting to have a CARD supervisor working on your child's case and starting really quality ABA in your home?
Really, I think the first step is just to call us and say, I live in Montana, or I live in Nebraska, and I need help.
Or I live in Beijing.
I live in Beijing.
Right.
Or it's even some state or city that I don't even recognize. It doesn't even matter. And I honestly think that families literally, all they have to say is, I just need help. Tell me what I need to do, and we will walk them through the process.
Okay.
And so whether they email us or communicate with us via our toll-free number or are referred to us by a family friend, it doesn't even matter. And we'll walk them through the process. We'll send them an application. We'll provide them a description of how these things work and what a rough timeline would be of just, we need to send you paperwork, fill that out. It's a little bit time consuming, but it's necessary.
It is necessary.
And then we want to be able to review it as well, and then also select on the supervisor that it's appropriate for you.
Yeah.
We hand select supervisors. So we're not working off of a pool of people.
Right.
A pool of 70, 80 people that will say, oh, pick the first person off the list.
Right.
It really isn't like that. We have a select group of people that we choose and that we rely on to work with children, in different locations. But we also have supervisors with certain types of specialties that we want to make sure that, in looking at a child's paperwork or their file, that we are picking the best supervisor for them. We want to make sure that we take everything into account.
And it does take a little while. There is a process, and it takes some time for that all to work out, because the parent does have to fill out the paperwork. You guys do have to go over the paperwork and do all those things. I know that can be so frustrating for a parent, the amount of waiting time that there is to start services with anything, with any provider. I know I was frustrated in the beginning. If you know this is what helps my child, then why can't we start it now?
Exactly.
But what I do love to tell people is that don't be a victim and don't just sit around and wait while you're waiting. There's CARD learning and there's skills. Get started.
Exactly. And we tell them exactly the same thing. And we're also very honest with families as far as a timeline goes. Okay. A lot of times parents will ask us if, to have a supervisor that's closest to them. But in the reality of it is that sometimes I don't, and so I'm always honest with families. If I say, I know you're in New York, but I don't have a New York supervisor. The closest supervisor I have is Washington, D.C. What do you want to do? Do you want to wait for a New York supervisor, or do you want to take the one from Washington, D.C.? or do you want to look at skills, do that, let's talk about our options.
Right.
And I think we're all very willing and happy to walk through that process with the family, even if they say, let me think it over.
Yeah.
Okay, that you have to think it over. This is a very big commitment,
Yeah.
and it requires a lot from families, and we want them to be as comfortable as they can possibly be.
So starting with a phone call or an email, they can go to the CARD website, and there is
Submit
more
an application.
Yeah, there's more information on the CARD workshop model there, but there's also a toll-free number, and Emily will get that up there. It is on the screen for us as well. But so as a family moves forward, and if they decide after all of that, and you really have somebody that's going to help you say, here are what's available for you wherever you are, and it's going to be different for every family.
Correct.
There's also going to be the issue of how you're funding it, too.
Correct.
And CARD will help you to examine whether you're eligible for insurance or other things like that that can help you to defray the cost or take care of the cost. So you're not left alone to that. And I think that's important to let parents know.
And there is a potential to receive the same types of funding that our families that are local to our sites have. We definitely have workshop families who receive school district funding. We definitely have families who are receiving insurance funding. So those options, are just as possible for any other family.
Yeah, and I always say to people, it doesn't hurt and it doesn't cost you anything to call and find out.
Yes.
I think sometimes we're so afraid that we're going to get a no, you aren't covered, that we don't ask.
Yes.
But the truth of the matter is that more and more people are being covered. So it's a free phone call and find out, because it's possible that the money is not the issue here.
And even when a family tells me, I don't think I'm covered, I always say, double check it.
Yeah.
Double check it, and let us double check it for you as well. Let's just make sure we cover all of our bases here, because what you may know from a year ago may be completely different this year, or it may be changing in the coming year. And so I always tell family, well, today's a new day. Let's check it for today, and let's forget about what we know from the past, and let's just move forward.
Yes, absolutely, and still looking at all the options based on the information that you find out. Okay, great. So let's assume that the family goes through this process. They decide this is the best thing for us, the workshop model. They filled out the application. They figured out their funding with the help of CARD, and they're getting ready to start. What kinds of things do they need to do to get themselves ready?
I think the most important thing for a family to do is really to start looking for therapists.
Okay.
I make some suggestions as to how they can interview, how they can post or look for therapists. I think for the most part, families have an idea of how they want to do it. So through their local university, through their local community outreach groups, or like Big Brother programs, things of that nature. I know some families have also obtained therapists through their church groups, or even just word of mouth, somebody's babysitter,
right?
Things of that nature. And I encourage everyone to still go through an interview process.
Yes.
I encourage parents to still have some semblance of a contract with a therapist, because they are employers. Parents are going to be the employers of these individuals.
Yeah.
There has to be an agreement. There has to be a schedule. There has to be an expectation on the parts of the therapist as to, it's an expectation that you need to be arriving on so-and-so date, so-and-so times of the day. You cannot be late. You cannot cancel late last minute unless there's a valid reason for it, and so forth. So
you run it like a business.
I definitely do. I tell families to do exactly the same thing. And I also tell families to go through the process of an interview as if this person is looking for a career choice. This is a career choice, and I think sometimes people in this field don't realize it, because a lot of our therapists are students, and they're fairly young, that they're not looking at it as a career choice. They're looking at it just like a babysitting job or something, and it really isn't. This is a very big responsibility. We have high expectations, and it doesn't go anywhere from there.
Yeah, and especially because you are going to invest in this person. You're going to train them to be able to do this. this, and that's training that's going to be valuable for them to be able to get other jobs.
Yes.
You want to make sure that you've got the right person who's going to come in, and because you're really giving them part of their paycheck to begin with, which is this really important training that's going to be on their resume, helping them to get jobs the rest of their lives. You want to make sure that you've got somebody who's going to stay after the training and help your child. And they're going to be in your home.
Yep.
I mean,
on a regular basis.
On a regular basis, they're going to be using your toilet paper. I like to say. You know what I'm
in your
saying?
kitchen.
Yes. They're going to be, you know, pulling things out and saying, this is where we store the toys to work with. This is, you know, they become an extension of the family, and sometimes they become part of the family.
Definitely.
Yes. Whenever I talk to parents and we talk about, oh yeah, let's talk about what it's like for a period of time, 2 to 4 years, to have a bunch of people who at one point were virtual strangers tromp through your house.
Yes, exactly.
It's a really, it can be the most wonderful thing, and it can be the most frustrating thing, but it becomes a part of your reality. We talk all the time now about how strange it is that our house is not filled with people anymore. It's the most bizarre thing. Okay, so what I want to ask you, Kathy, is that we know that some people are using skills and they're hiring and training therapists and paying them an actual wage, and in some cases they're having a team of volunteers that are getting the job done. Do you have a lot of families, or a few families, or any families that are doing that in the workshop model, or are they all paying their therapists?
It's a wide variety.
Okay.
We get definitely people that are paid just very similarly to how we function here. We have families that have volunteers. We have families that are using family members, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and so forth. And I think they all band together and are an amazing support system. And I tell families as well that, you know, during your initial workshop, everyone that is going to be involved in your child's life should attend the initial workshop. You know, there's a certain period of time during the workshop where it's really is dedicated to just those individuals that are working on the program. But the initial actual training portion where we're providing information, I think it's to benefit everyone that's involved in that child's life. Everyone can benefit from that information.
Absolutely. What a wonderful, wonderful thing. Almost like a party to say, hey, everybody that's involved, we're all going to be here and get this information.
And I also encourage families to videotape, because if they videotape, then they can share that information with other people that come into their child's life later, you know.
It's a great idea. It's great. And you guys have been doing this for a while, so you really have perfected helping the families to use the resources that you give them in the most efficient way, which I absolutely love. And in terms of, so they've interviewed these people, they found them, and we talk from time to time and give tips about, you know, where to post and how to post and all those things. I'm always surprised because people tend to have very rigid ideas about who's going to be the best therapist. Well, I need to get psychology students.
Yes.
And sometimes those are great therapists, but sometimes it's the music student.
Yes. I always tell people, you know, forget about the degrees, forget about their work experience, forget about do they have a BCBA, BCAB? I mean, there's a value to those individuals, definitely. However, I always tell families, you're looking for someone that's going to work well with your child, that will sit down and play with him or her, that will have a tea party, that will go run around and play ball, that will be in the trenches and playing all the kid games, roll on the floor, do play dates with 3 or 4 kids, getting dirty. You know, and those are going to be music students. Those are going to be people that are just that may be volunteering their time with the church groups. You know, those are individuals that are working at the gyms, and so, you know, anyone that actually just looks at children as children and say, I want to play with you, is going to be a potentially great therapist.
And I think too, if they're passionate about something, I always think that passion about something can transfer to something else. And when you guys come in, I always like to ask you guys, you know, how you got started and was your career path to be working with autism, because almost none of you say that was what you chose. You know, we have Dr. Jonathan Jonathan Tarbox, who comes in and says, I was a history major, and a mom was looking for a person to work with their son on my campus, and I went, and it changed my whole life because I saw that this child could learn.
Yeah.
And so I like to remind everybody, you know, you could be posting something on a campus and you could get Dr. Jonathan Tarbox in the making. But you were studying psychology, correct?
I was actually working with adults prior to getting into this aspect of the field. And I really came across ABA by accident. I was my last year of UCLA, and I needed extra units. And so someone said, hey, have you tried the behavior mod class? There's an instructor by the name of Ivar Lovas that teaches that course, and I hear he's a hoot. And then I said, no, but I guess I'll try it, you know, because it's something that I haven't, it's in the course, you know, the list of courses, but I've never really thought about it.
Thank heavens he was a hoot.
It was a great experience. Yeah, but it was,
your life to this.
Exactly, it was a great experience, and honestly, I don't think I would have gone into this field if I hadn't had that experience with him.
Isn't that funny?
It was just, he was amazing.
Yeah.
He really, really was, and he opened the doors. Like, it was just all of a sudden, a whole new set of opportunities came up, and that I never even thought about working with children.
But clearly you love it.
Oh, yes.
And clearly you saw what a difference you could make and stuck around for that. That's fascinating. All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, I'm going to ask you that once the therapists have all been hired, what then the expectations are, what the beginning is like, what the middle is like, and what the end is like. So stick with us. Back with more with Kathy Viscondi in just a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here with the fabulous Kathy Viscondi. She's been talking to us about the CARD workshop model for our families who are in places where they wouldn't otherwise have access to an ABA provider, and how wonderful that is. So we've talked about the process of how a family can start to find out, how they're going to hire the therapists themselves and how they might go about doing that. And even in some cases, when we say hire, it may not be for money. We just saw a wonderful video about a family who was able to have an entire church group be there for their child to make a difference, so they didn't pay a single therapist. I love telling families that so that they know that it isn't always about this. There are organizations that have volunteers, and there are ways to make things work, and you guys have been doing this for a long time, and you advise families about what has worked for other families in the past. But once they get to the point where it's time and the supervisor is going to come, and you've advised them to get everyone who's going to have access to the child and be in their life to be at this initial meeting, what's the expectation? How does it work? What's it going to look like? How different is their life going to become?
It's very different.
Yeah.
It's all of a sudden, I mean, we've talked before about all of a sudden you have people coming in and out of your house for 2 to 3 hours at a time, and it could literally be, you know, 2 therapists, 3 therapists within a day. So a session in the morning, a session in the afternoon, sometimes another session later in the afternoon with just a half hour in between. And so I think it's a big juggling act, I think, for a lot of families where, you know, I think a lot of families are used to maybe taking their kids out to different types of sports activities or those types of things, or taking them out to speech therapy and taking them out to OT. Well, now everyone's coming to you and they stay, and there's a very, very set a task list or set program as to what everyone's supposed to be doing. And so families are given basically a program. This is what we're going to be working on for this child. This is how we're going to work on it. These are the strategies that we're going to put into place to teach these skills, how we're going to maintain them, and how we're going to generalize them. And then this is also the strategies of how to not only generalize them to different people in the house or in the home, like immediate family members, but also to everyone else in the community. People in the school setting, people at the park, people at different activities or birthday parties and so forth. So all of those strategies will be put into place.
Absolutely.
And what I tell families is that, you know, think about the home or your treatment room, if that's what you want to refer to it, or where you do a lot of your therapy. That's really just a starting point. What you learn in that room, automatically there has to be intention to bring it out.
Absolutely.
And so as soon as a child learns to say hi in response to you saying hi, the next goal is walk outside and start testing that skill. You know, treatment is only going to be effective if you can walk outside and take advantage of that skill. And so we encourage that all day long. And so for a family, I think sometimes they think that, you know, everything is in this one room and you're isolated in there for hours and hours and hours. And there is an aspect where, you know, you are working in this room, but it's really just to minimize distractions in the beginning points. And ultimately, you need to walk out because real life is full of distractions. And we want our children to be able to work within those settings.
Yeah. And important for parents to realize, too, that, you know, because they might be thinking, oh, well, when am I going to have time to do this? Because if the therapists are going to be there all the time, that you take the therapist with you. You go, I was talking the other day about you go to a birthday party and you take the therapist with you.
When I was doing therapy, it was my favorite time. I used to go to birthday parties. I used to go to the mall during Christmas. I used to run errands at, you know, the, what is it, not the pharmacy, but like a CVS or the drugstore. Like I used to go to kids' parties for Valentine's Day. We used to go to McDonald's. We used to go to the different food places. I used to go have dinner. I used to go to families' homes during Thanksgiving and help the family, help us all work together to prepare for Thanksgiving dinner. So there wasn't, and it wasn't a matter of me necessarily doing therapy. It was really teaching the family how can we put everything together on this day. And that's really what it was. I've taken multiple trips to Disneyland, you know, and so, and it's really just, we're really just there to facilitate and then teach, you know, so we want to serve as a model to parents and to therapists, but the goal is really for the child to learn to do that with their family on their own.
Absolutely. And I just want to clarify, when you say, you know, I would go and do errands, we're not saying she would go and do the errands for the family. That the family, you know, mom or dad is running the errand and they would have to take the child anyway, so the child goes with them, the therapist goes with them, because it's the real life stuff. That's the stuff that we can't do right now, that you say, well, that's fine, you can sit at the table, but I have to go and pick up, you know, this from the grocery store, and that's the period of time when my child has tantrums. What do I do? Well, now the therapist goes with, and we work on the issues.
And even for situations like that, it's like that's a perfect example where if a parent has to go to the grocery store and that's where the child tantrums all the time, there's a process to get to that point. You know, we talk about teaching skills in terms of managing behaviors first and foremost, teaching children how to follow certain types of instructions, and then you want to generalize outward. And so it's not a situation where we just all of a sudden go to the grocery store and deal with it. There's a process, and we really have to work towards that goal. And sometimes it's also a learning part for the family as well, where, you know what, I may not get through all 100 items on my grocery list today. Sometimes it might just be 1 or 2, just so that we could be a successful opportunity, and then come back later and aim for 5 or 10 and so forth. So there's a process.
But looking at your whole life and working through all the things in your life, that's so important. So, and then at some point though, the therapists do go home.
Yes,
you know, even if you have the session in the morning and a half-hour break, and a session in the afternoon, a half-hour break, and another session that's ending as you're putting dinner on the table, the therapists go home at some point. And as parents, whether you're doing a workshop model or you're doing anything else, you need to be able to uphold what has been done during the day.
Correct. And it's very important for families to be very involved and very knowledgeable as to what's being taught during the day. And at the same time, they also have their own list of things that they need to work on with their child. So a therapist might be working on chores, but it's really going to come into play after hours, you know, with a parent, or a bedtime routine and so forth. So we as therapists could easily work on the bedtime routine during the day, but it's really only applicable in the evening. And so, you know, families have to be on board, and I think every member of the family has to understand, because even siblings, younger siblings, older siblings, grandparents are living in the household, they all have to be supporting everything, supporting of one another, but also reinforcing everything the child is learning.
Yeah, it's a huge time commitment, but I can tell you as a parent, it's worth it. It's just very simply, it's worth it because your life starts to make sense again.
It does.
And things start to work, and you see your child get happier, and you see the family unit get happier, and then you get to a point where you're done. This is amazing because you work so hard to make it work within your home and rearrange your life, and usually you do have to dedicate a room to it, right? And that's probably different for absolutely everyone.
It's different for everyone, correct?
Works in a different way, and if you're thinking, well, I don't have a room to give to it, you'd be surprised what you can make work.
Yes.
But you do come to a day when it's over. There's a gradual decrease, but therapy ends. I don't think we talk about that enough.
No.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yes. And as a parent, on the day that I got told, okay, so this is your end date, and it was about 9 months out. I went, what do you mean? That can't possibly be.
Yes.
What will we do? How can that? Is he not going to be ready by then? How can that be? And I've talked to other parents about that a lot in the last couple of years because it's this crazy phenomenon, and then it's over. And you get your life back.
Exactly. It's a transition. I definitely think it's a transition for everyone that's involved. Even just the simple fact that there were people in your home and now there aren't.
Yeah.
Where there was always someone coming in and out on a regular basis. Some families give keys to their therapist, so that they can come in
and get started while we're coming back from OT.
Exactly, or meet you in the house, as we're driving home from school, so that way you don't have to sit in the car.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, keys are being returned, and now it's a matter of planning a play date, so they can go have a nice dinner together or things like that nature. Whereas, in some situations, I've definitely have had families where the plan was to have a dinner out every Tuesday with a therapist so that they can work on restaurant skills or communication skills, conversation skills at a restaurant, things of that nature, or just introducing new foods. And then now all of a sudden parents are going out by themselves. So it's a transition.
It's my son graduated a little less than a year ago, and my husband and I, from time to time, will find ourselves saying, "Oh, we got to do this, or we don't have to do it." And they go, "Oh no, that's not a factor anymore." That's a very interesting thing there. That we don't have to get home in time to meet a therapist at the door, or we don't have to plan the vacation around this kind of thing. It's a very interesting thing, but I want parents to know that it does come to an end.
It does, and I think families, I think it's hard for them to realize that they actually do have all the skills that they need. They have been part of the process from the beginning, and even from day one, they already had a good amount of skills and skill and knowledge of how to move forward. And even from the very first day of the initial training, there is so much information that's passed along, and it all makes sense. We have terminology that families may not be familiar with or therapists aren't familiar with. But when you talk about it in very simple terms and give common day examples, everyone sits there and says, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I already do that. But I didn't know there was a word for that.
Right.
And so I think, for families when we transition out, there is a little bit of hesitation. But it really, in all honesty, our families or parents know. They just already know. And I think in a lot of ways they've always known. It's just a matter of, I have to remember to keep doing. Yes.
I mean, that's where we are. And I think sometimes the biggest shifts are the tiniest little things that you might have been doing, in a 10-step process thing, you might have been doing 9 of them and you weren't having the success. And then it's that one little thing that CARD comes in and says, here's the little knob you got to turn. And you go, no, really? Seriously? That's the part that I wasn't doing? And then I always go, no, it can't be that. And then you turn it and you go, oh, I guess it was that.
And I think, and families still communicate with us periodically. I even though we give a date, I think that helps all of us. But at the same time, we never want a parent to feel that they all of a sudden don't have us as a resource. And we're still in touch with families every so often with a little question here or there. And even families I haven't spoken to in years, they'll just call and say, I haven't spoken to you in 4 years, but I had this one question as we transitioned to high school.
Right.
I'm like, okay. Right. And so I think for anyone that we work with, they remember that we're still here.
Yeah.
And they literally can just call. And now you can just email.
Yeah.
So it's easy.
Yeah, once a card member family, you're always
and you're always going to be a part of us, yes.
Very cool. Well, Kathy, I thank you so much. This is a very exciting thing that's available to families. If they have more questions, we mentioned that you can call the 800 number. We'll throw that up on the screen again. You can visit the card website, centerforautism.com, go to the services tab.
Correct.
And then you can see all the different things that are offered through card, and one of them is the workshop model. That's what you're looking for. And you can email, but start the conversation. And part of that conversation will be about what funding you have available to you through insurance and other things, but don't assume that you know, because you may not know. But thank you so much for being with us. We'll definitely have you back again to talk about this and other topics, because you're so wonderful.
Thank you.
And thank you for being, I had mentioned earlier that I'm so humbled to work in a place where there are people who get so passionate about working with our kids that it isn't uncommon for them to come in and say, I was thinking about this last night in bed. Kathy is one of those people. We're very lucky to have her working for our kids and for us. It's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much.